Hello, this is Matt Wilhelm from Yellowstone Fly Fishing School in Livingston, Montana, and I'm going to tie for you today one of my favorite flies, the March Brown Soft Hackle. One thing about March Browns, it's one of my favorite hatches here in Montana. It happens in April, mid to late April, usually right before runoff starts. The mayfly is about a size 14, maybe a 12. But what we're tying today is kind of the emerging insect. And one of the things that's interesting about the March Brown is that most mayfly species, when they get to the surface of the water, they use the surface tension of the water to help pull their exoskeleton off their body. The March Brown starts to shed its exoskeleton underwater. So they have this exoskeleton hanging off them as they kind of emerge up through the water, which makes them a terrible swimmer. So the habitat or the places in the river where you find these nymphs tend to migrate toward what we call softer water, eddies, pools, things like that, where there's not as much current. So when you're fishing this fly, you kind of want to focus on maybe those softer water areas. And I found this fly to be a really good imitation for the emerger. I use it perhaps dropped off of a adult, like a parachute March Brown or a sparkle dun March Brown, and I'll fish it as a dropper. Sometimes I'll fish it below a very small indicator, strike indicator as well. But it's been a great fly, and I'm going to tie one for you now. So the materials are this. I'm going to be using a size 12 emerger hook, and it's a curved shanked light wire hook. I'll be using pheasant for the tail and the body. I'll be using a piece of copper wire to rib the pheasant with on the abdomen. And then for the hackle, a piece of Hungarian partridge for the hackle. All right, so let's get started. And we'll put a hook in the vise. There we go. We'll put a thread base down to the curve of the hook. Well, I guess the whole hook is curved. So when your thread is resting, a good place for the tails is either near the hook, the barb of the hook, or maybe slightly behind as your thread is resting. That's a good length for this fly. Cut off the tags. Then I'll take a few pieces of pheasant tail, and I'm going to attach these for the tail or the trailing shuck. Now we don't want these to be too long, maybe about as long as the hook gap. I'm going to lay these in here. I'm going to give my thread a counterclockwise spin. That way, let it spin for a minute. And that way when I go to add or put a little slack in there and add these tails, that thread will fall right back against my fingertips. And I'm going to work this thread forward a little bit because I want the body diameter to be consistent, right about to where the thorax would be. Then I'll cut these off. Then I'll take my piece of copper and I'll tie my copper in right here. And then I'll work my thread back to the curve, tying that copper down. Then I'm going to select a few more pieces of the pheasant. Maybe about, I probably have about 5 or 6 fibers there. I'm going to tie these in by the tips. I'm going to do that counterclockwise spin again so my thread will fall right back against my fingers. Easier to tie that material in. And then I'm going to tie that down, and then I'm going to move my thread forward. Then we're going to take this and we're going to make one wrap next to the other all the way up toward where we're going to tie on our soft hackle. Hold this up. You be careful with how much pressure you put on the thread on these first initial wraps, because this is a delicate feather. If you pull too hard on this 6/0 thread, it'll cut through those fibers. Cut these off. And then we'll take our wire. And when I wrap my wire, I don't counter wrap. I go the same way, and that's just the way I like to do it. Go this way. This will help to strengthen the fly a little bit. I know some people too that before they wrap their pheasant body, they'll put a little bit of crazy glue or Zap-A-Gap or head cement on the shank of the hook to make it a little bit stronger, but I tend not to. So there's the tail and the body. Now the last thing is the soft hackle. So what I'm going to do here is I've got my soft hackle feather, and I'm going to take my hackle pliers, and I'm going to, at the very center, right where the center of the vein would be, I'm going to clip those on there just like that. All right. And then I'm going to pull down and back and isolate the very tip of that feather. Okay, just like that. Now, I'm going to shorten my thread, and I'm going to give it a counterclockwise spin so it's easier to handle. And I'm going to tie down that feather tip right behind the eye of the hook. And then get rid of any. And I've got some rotating hackle pliers. These are a nice tool for working with small materials. It just makes it easier to hold on to stuff. And we're going to hackle the fly now. Bring it around. As soon as that hackle there, the hackle's starting, so I'm going to come around one time, depending on how sparse you want these, but I'm going to go around 2 times. 2 times, all the way around. And then bring my thread back up and behind, tying off that soft hackle feather. About 5 times. And I'm going to carefully cut off this. There we go. Now, if you have any misbehaving feathers like I have, all you have to do is just pull them back with your fingers and put a few wraps behind the eye of the hook like that to make them go back how you want them. You get these little, there we go. And then we whip finish. And that's a March Brown soft hackle emerger. You could put a bead on there if you wanted to as well. I tend to just leave them like this. The water will, the fly will absorb with water and the fly will sink down. Great fly for mid to late April when the March Browns are emerging. Thank you very much.